Welcome everybody to our webinar. It's very nice to be back online again for a change. Funny to be able to say that. Today we're going to release for you or show you the release of our platform, the re-release. We've relaunching the platform with lots of new functionality for ready2LOOP. And we're going to be focusing on materials providers, which is one of the value chain layers that we've been focusing quite a lot on the project very recently. By way of introduction, the webinar this afternoon is going to be given to you by 4 people. Firstly, myself, my name is Tim McAloone. I'm professor here at DTU, and I'm the lead of the ready2LOOP project. And then we have Daniela. Would you like to introduce?
Yeah, my name is Daniela Pigosso, associate professor here at DTU and co-lead in the project.
And then we have Nikki.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Nikki Bai. I'm senior manager in Rumble.
And Joe.
Yeah, hi, my name is Jar, and I'm a project manager and consultant at Vegan Moe.
Great. So for the next hour or so, we're going to be presenting, but also discussing with you, hopefully, and we really welcome questions from you in the Q&A, and we'll see how many of those we get through. We're going to leave plenty of time for questions and discussion at the end. On our agenda today, we'd like to, you could say, re-motivate why circular economy. Circular economy has had a lot of focus over the years, but you could say maybe over the last year or so, the focus has been come on more on, you could say, CO2, in particular on the climate change, but also very much on the energy crisis, obviously, especially in some parts of the world. So we're going to focus on why circular economy, and then why and how ready2LOOP can help with the circular economy transition. After that, we're going to show you our new platform. And when we show you the platform, we're going to go on to look at the materials providers layer in particular. So we have a lot to do. So first of all, this is one picture of sustainability. Sustainability is measured in many different ways. And this is a nice way of showing it from the European Environment Agency, which has been inspired by a number of different sources. On the x-axis, we see the so-called Human Development Index, which is the social sustainability of any country, the green bubbles being countries. And the further to the right we are, the more the socially sustainable a country may be. The Human Development Index is basically measured by life expectancy at birth, GDP, and education levels. On the y-axis, excuse me, we have the so-called ecological footprint, which is how many hectares per person per year are necessary to focus the or to absorb the amount of resources, the amount of CO2, and the amount of basically the whole ecological footprint that we're making per person per year in a given country. All of the green dots, they're countries. All of the green dots with red circles around them, they are European member states. And the sweet spot for sustainability, both social sustainability above 0.8 on this Human Development Index, and environmental or ecological sustainability below 1.8 on the y-axis, the ecological footprint, the sweet spot is in the green area at the bottom. And the reason you can't see any green bubbles in the green area at the bottom is because there are none. So we have a real desperate need to, on the one hand, bring countries to the right-hand side of the graph here on the social sustainability, so we keep or attain a good Human Development Index, but that we decouple it from exactly the problem that you could say the socially or human developed countries also manage to do, is to increase their ecological footprint. We need to decouple that. So this is a nice mantra for us, you could say, for circular economy. Could be a way to focus on this. And indeed, there's been different proposals about how we can actually move to circular economy and what the contribution of circular economy is in the climate challenge, which is a big focus for many industries and many regions and many countries at the moment. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation has recently produced a report where they estimate that almost half of the CO2 emissions hail from products. And if you look at this, you can see that they're basically saying that the half of the CO2 emissions hail from products, and around half of the emissions reductions could come from a circular economy transition. So this is why and how we are relating you could say the climate crisis to the resource crisis that we're also in, and the need to really focus on circular economy. And there's lots of benefits here. And I guess that if you're joining this webinar, that you don't need to know the paradigm we're moving from and to, but just to make sure we're all on the same page, what we want to do is to move from this linear take, make, use, and dispose paradigm over to a circular economy, where it's estimated that there's an enormous market value, just to say in business terms, but of course there's an enormous contribution. Almost half of the product-related emissions can be avoided by transitioning to a circular economy. And what are we doing from our perspective on this project that we're showing to you today on the webinar? Basically, we're looking at how can we support industry to see how ready they are to transition to a circular economy. The way that we do this is through a number of steps. First of all, we like to share knowledge about circular economy and how it's important for an individual company, but also in a value chain perspective, how important circular economy is. We also look in particular today on the materials provider aspect here. And then later on, we're looking also at conducting a readiness assessment to see how ready for circular economy companies are, and we'll be focusing on that today. And then we look at identifying our strengths and our gaps from an individual organization's perspective. And then finally, to start the transition. So one thing is to see how ready we are and where our strengths and gaps are. And the next is how we start the transition. And that's where our consultants, colleagues from Vegan More and Ambu, in this case, can help us along the path there. How we're measuring readiness within our platform, and we'll see in more details in a short while. We're basically using a scale which is as objective as we can get. It's a self-assessment platform, and I know that many of you delegates have been on the platform before and seen the platform when it was just for product manufacturers. And it's the same scale all the way from we've not started our transition with respect to a particular aspect, a particular question we may ask, all the way through we're planning a pilot implementation, we're executing a pilot, we're planning a scale up, or we're fully scaled with our initiative. And using this scale, we can basically gauge our readiness that so we can see within an organization, where should we start, where should we make the next steps, and what are the strengths and what are the gaps we should focus on. From a project perspective, we are supported by the Danish Industry Foundation. DTU is the main knowledge partner in this and creating the logic and the contents and the tool and the methods behind this. Then we have the two consultants who you just briefly met before at the beginning of the seminar, at the webinar, Vegan More and Ambu. And their job is to bring accelerators and to make sure that companies come all the way through this process and make sure that they don't just measure their readiness, but also make the change based upon their readiness. And to help us there and to keep us on track, we have three societal partners in a steering group, which are the Manufacturing Academy of Denmark, the Danish Business Authority, and the Confederation of Danish Industry. So that's the partners behind the project. Basically, we had the project we're presenting to you today is based upon a 5-year program, which Daniela is going to walk us through, which was called Match, and we're going to show you what the difference between the Match and the ready2LOOP project are. Over to you, Dan.
Yeah, thank you. And over the past 5 years, we've actually been helping hundreds of companies in understanding how ready they are to make their transition to a circular economy. And we did that by focusing on 4 main areas. First of all, through the readiness assessment, those companies could understand what were both their strengths, but also opportunities, having a very systemic view of circular economy, and understanding that it goes much beyond recycling only, for instance, to embracing different areas of the organization, including strategy and business models, product design, and also life optimization, for instance. On the basis of this assessment, the companies also got an overview of their readiness profile across the 8 dimensions we were measuring for manufacturing companies. And this was really interesting for them, not only to have an understanding of where they are, but also to have a harmonized view inside the company and across different areas, all the way from the very operational areas in the organization to the most strategic ones as well. And another really interesting feature of the platform that the companies usually really spend lots of time on was on understanding how well ahead or maybe behind they were in relation to all of the other companies in the platform. So they could do an external benchmarking by looking into companies maybe from the same sector or the same region or maybe the same type of business. And by doing that, having a better understanding about where do we actually want to go and what are the next steps. And on the basis of all of this information, then those companies felt ready to kick off their transition and advance in the areas where they could see the biggest business opportunities. And that's extremely important because circular economy is such a complex topic that requires a systemic thinking that you don't really know where to prioritize, then it can become really difficult to actually have an effective transition. And if I am to say then what's changed from Match, this original platform, where we were basically focusing on manufacturing companies, to ready2LOOP, what we have today, I can actually say that we have quite many new advancements to that. In ready2LOOP, which started a little bit more than a year ago, we actually have the ambition to extend the overall platform from only 1 layer, manufacturing companies, to 6 other layers in the value chain. And the reason for it is that we actually figure out on the basis of the data from manufacturing companies in the platform, at the time, a little bit over 600 companies, that despite their efforts to make this transition to circularity, only 25% of them were actually collaborating in the value chain. And we know that there's no one single company that can make this transition to the circular economy alone. It's really important to collaborate with different partners, both upstream and downstream in the value chain. And this is exactly what we are focusing on here on ready2LOOP. And the realization that, yes, it is important to focus on the manufacturing companies, but that circular economy only arises when we actually manage to involve the different partners across the value chain. So here you can see what are the different layers that we are developing just now in ready2LOOP. Today, in fact, we are launching the first layer, materials providers, at 1 o'clock. Then after that, we'll be focusing on component manufacturers. Manufacturing companies, they are already there and have been for the past 5 years. Then we'll also be looking to logistics, both forward but also reverse logistics, so that we can close the loop of products and materials. We'll be looking to retailers, trying to understand what are their best practices for ensuring a circular economy. Moving towards maintenance and repair service companies that are actually helping us to prolong the lifetime of the products for as long as possible, keeping the value, and by doing that, minimizing the need for acquiring new resources, all the way to value recovery companies, the ones that are helping us to recover value, not only at a material level through recycling, but also at a parts and product level through strategies such as remanufacturing or refurbishing. And as I mentioned to you, the focus over the past 5 years has been over here on the manufacturers layer. Today, we are launching the materials providers, And we're going to talk a little bit more about that so that you can understand what are the different dimensions that we need to take into account when understanding the readiness of materials providers. And we also have a quite tight timeline over the next months and years, where we'll be launching more and more layers. So by the end of the webinar, we're going to tell you exactly when what is going to be launched. But before that, let's have a look into the new platform, which we are really proud of. Back to you, Tim.
Thank you. Yeah, so very briefly on the new platform, basically what we've done is to develop on the basis of the platform we had already for the former Match project, which has run, as Daniela mentioned, for 5 years. And we've now, you could say, disentangled the whole platform so that we can add new layers on as we go. What we're going to do in the first instance at the beginning of the seminar, of the webinar here, is to show you a little bit around, you could say, the front end before you log into the platform. And at the end of the webinar, we'll show you the pictures on the right-hand side, which gets us to the actual readiness assessment. So I'm not sure whether, Daniela, if you could share your screen with us for the front end, and then we can talk our way through it. So basically what we have, we've redesigned the whole platform, and it's ready to for you to see now. So the front page, like any front page, is here to motivate and to inform you what is circular economy. We are assuming that people who come onto the Ready2Loop website are there to actually see where the news are for the platform. So if you were to scroll down on the platform, you can see the motivation, some of the motivation like I gave before, and even further down what the Ready2Loop product is about, and it steps you through step by step. It's about assessing your readiness, analyzing your results, defining your path, and then starting your transition to a circular economy. If we go and click on the circular economy tab, we can see very briefly what circular economy is and why we strive for circular economy. And that's, again, some of the, you could say, the argumentation and the reasoning behind that. Many companies we work with very much like to have a basic argumentation in place so that they can use this to see why circular economy, but also why circular economy in a value chain perspective. On the Our Process tab of the website, you can see basically the process we follow through. You can mouse over or click on the different parts of the segments and get a more introduction to what the different layers on the platform are. And these are the ones that Daniela just mentioned we're going to be unfolding, and the one that Daniela just stopped on here is materials provider. And in your own time, you can click on the Read More Here button and read a bit more about what are we defining as materials providers, what are the challenges and what are the opportunities for materials providers, and the same for all the different value chain layers. And then further down, we give you an overview as to how the whole thing works, a little bit more detailed than on the front page about all the different stages, and gives you actually a nice, you could say, a recipe for carrying this out yourselves in your own companies. On the tools page, you can see all the tools that we're gathering, and there are more and more tools as they come along. You can see here that we don't show all the tools straight away. It's a free platform, anybody can use it. But what we'd like you to do is to log on and use the platform and try a readiness assessment, and first then will we unlock the tools for you. So when you've logged on and to the platform, you can basically see the tools, and Daniela's just logged us on there, and we can see all the tools that are available. Those of you who have used the Match platform before, you'll know that once you're logged on, you can see a description of the tools, and then for any of the tools, it gives you again a recipe. And then once you've carried out your readiness assessment, you can even go to the download button. That becomes enabled once you've finished a readiness assessment, and download all the templates we have for the tools. It also shows you, as we're dwelling here on the pictures, which part of which dimensions of different value chain layers that particular tool is actually suitable for. So this one, this tool that we just chose at random is very important for materials innovation, for example. And let's have a look in the manufacturers layer, whether it has any relations there. Also for organizational aspects for the manufacturing layer. So here's the relation there. And it also tells you on the right-hand side where the tool fits in terms of your readiness, at what decision level, what type of participation level, but also what type of, what phase in the transition path you're on as well. So go and have a browse in the tools. We have about 130 tools there. And you might be thinking, 130 tools, how on earth do we choose those? We'll show you a little bit later on how you do that according to your readiness levels. On the cases tab, we're showing you some the success cases that have been through the project, where you can read about companies we've had through the platform and who've done their own circular transition, and also about the process they went through and the tools that they used. So this is a really nice resource to get lots of inspiration and maybe do some form of a benchmarking if there's a company that looks a little bit like yours, take inspiration from how they're doing. And then before we go back into the presentation for the webinar, I'd like to go briefly onto the About page and down to the bottom, because the platform is being developed by a big team of researchers and assistants here at DTU, and go and have a look at all those, because these are the real brains behind the platform. Those are the ones who need to be praised. And then you can also get the connections to our consultants and our certified consultants there. When you go onto the green button at the top, the My Loop, if you just click on it, actually, Daniela, and we can see, and we'll pause here in terms of where the platform is, and we'll show you the rest of this later. You can see if you were to mouse over the ready2LOOP logo again, we can see the different areas. Sorry, yeah, you were right place, Daniela, the broken down one, yeah. So we can see here the different layers of the platform. We have access to materials providers and product manufacturers. The other layers are not yet ready, but the layers which are specifically relevant for you will become available as they are available as well. And there's all sorts of mechanisms for you to see how that actually functions. We'll tell you about that a bit later. So back to the presentation, and over to you, Daniela, to tell us about what then in materials providers and in respect to them.
Yeah, so let's dig down into the materials providers, understand what they are, but also how they are making their transition to a circular economy. And to start with, I'd like to start by the definition of what a material provider company is. And it is actually companies that are focusing on sourcing and processing materials, and then providing those to the manufacturer of components, parts, or products. So here, our main focus is not on the mining companies, but actually companies that are taking and processing those materials further so that they can fulfill a specific function in a component or in a product throughout its entire life cycle. And material provider companies, they are, of course, providing important resources to manufacturing companies. And for evaluating the readiness of manufacturing companies, we had those 8 dimensions, but they are, in fact, actually different, and they have different ways of transitioning into a circular economy. And through a very systematic research in the project, going through hundreds of different papers, having both internal and external workshops with companies from that specific layer, materials providers, we came up with the definition of 6 main dimensions that will help us to understand how ready material providers companies are, but also how to help them to understand strengths and gaps, to benchmark their performance so that they can define the next steps and the tools to be used in this transition. And if we focus a little bit more into those 6 different dimensions, we can see that at the middle, we have the organizational dimension, looking into internally in the company, what do they need to take into account to be ready for circular economy. Then we also have a dimension focused on strategy and business model, a dimension focused on materials innovation, and how do we actually develop new materials that are not only more circular, but can now also enable a circular economy. We're looking into sourcing and operations, how we are actually acquiring those materials and how we are further processing them. We look into looping. No matter how long the life of those materials are, they will be reaching end of life sooner or later, and it's important to understand how to loop them back so that we keep the value in the system. And then last but not least, dimension number 6 is related to policy and market. So what are the external legal factors and regulations that we need to be aware of to know how ready we are? But also from a market point of view, how can we actually know if our customers, the component manufacturers or the product manufacturers, are ready for the circular economy as well? With that, you get the overview of the 6 main dimensions. And what we are going to do now together with you is to dig down into each and every one of those so that you can understand a little bit more in details what they entail. And we are starting with the organizational dimension. Back to you, Tim.
Thanks, Daniela. Yeah, so this first dimension, the one in the middle for organization, and this is basically, it's in the middle because it's in the middle of every company, you and every organization. It's about how ready are we as an organization to make the transition to circular economy. We've seen many attempts at pilots for new business models, or pilots for collection systems, or pilots for new products, more circular products. And the reason that many of these fail is that the organizational readiness is not there. So this is actually a real core part of the circular readiness. And you're going to find this at the core of every single one of the new value chain layers that we produce. So the questions are slightly different depending on where in the value chain you are. On this particular value chain layer for materials providers, it's important to understand the business capabilities internally in the organization to be able to implement concepts based upon a good internal communication, so understanding the ambition levels and understanding that we actually have a program for circular economy running or about to run. It's about understanding our knowledge and our skills in the organization. It's about the corporate culture, developing, building upon, or changing the corporate culture towards a circular mindset. It's about thinking about, in a more, you could say, in a systematic way, what could be good process or programs or tools that we should consider either developing or gaining from other places, from consultants, or reading about or developing ourselves. It's about understanding risks and investments. It's also about understanding what is the business case for circularity in our organization. It's about the sustainability case. Is what we're doing, is it going to be more or less environmentally sustainable, socially sustainable, and also economically sustainable? And it's about getting our R&D activities into place. So within the platform, those of you who don't know the platform, what we basically do, if you were to click on the button here, there'll be a series of questions asking you about your organizational readiness here. So when you go onto the platform, you can see what those are. And the idea is to answer honestly and openly about how ready you are as an organization. We've taken a small example, which we'll very quickly go through, to inspire you about, hopefully, about what other companies are doing to make themselves ready for the transition to circular economy. And here we have a nice company here, Sekisui, which is a materials provider based in Japan. And basically, they're developing training programs within the organization in order to make sure that their skills for circular economy are heightened. One of the things we often see is that the sustainability department has a great idea to go circular, but if we don't bring all the other staff on board, then we have a real difficult time, maybe just because of lack of knowledge. So this is a nice example of a company which is making dedicated training programs for circular economy. That was very briefly about the first dimension. What about strategy and business model, Daniela?
Yeah, and that's the second dimension. And we often see that companies making the transition to a circular economy start by adding a statement in their overall strategy, defining some targets and indicators that will help them to measure their circularity. but also trying to understand how to change their business models so that they can, in fact, decouple value creation from resource consumption. And in this dimension, we are looking into different areas. So first of all, we are trying to understand whether companies have already incorporated circularity into their long-term strategy, whether they had already communicated externally to their key stakeholders what that strategy is, if they are ready to start investigating new revenue streams in their business, as well as new value propositions, new ways of creating value to their customers. If they are also looking to what are the resources that they need to invest in order to be able to implement all of those different circular ideas. But also, if on the basis of those different areas, if they are managing to enhance their market share to maybe new regions, a new market segment, or new customers that are willing to take more circular materials in their ways of producing components or products. And we also have an example here for you as an inspiration, and this is RHI Magnesita. It's a company that actually saw the opportunity to produce secondary raw materials to the steel market, and by doing so, actually starting a whole new part of their business with material that in the past used to be actually a waste stream. And what they do in addition to that is to provide recycling services to their customers. And this can happen both inside in their customers' facilities or in extra site in other places close by that will enable the recycling of those materials. And by doing that, they of course enable an optimal waste value to approach. With that, I'd like to move towards the third dimension, which is materials innovation.
Yeah, so materials innovation is actually one of the brand new dimensions in this in this value chain layer. So organization and strategy and business model, they were also in the product manufacturers layer. Materials innovation is about understanding how ready we are to really make sure the materials are in place for a circular economy, and in terms of what are the new materials we could imagine putting in to our products or to supply to our customers, and what are the ways in which we can actually enhance and enable a circular economy through new materials. So in this dimension, we're asking questions about what new materials are you, or not actually what materials, how ready are you to be looking for new materials to provide to your customers as a materials provider. In some circumstances, we want to provide less complex materials so that they're easier to disassemble in the product or easy to sort when we get the products back if they should go into material level. And other sides, we may have more complex materials and smart materials, which could be self-healing, or smart materials which have other functionalities which give more, you could say, functionality and value to the product for a longer period. We ask about readiness for updating existing materials being provided. Is there any opportunities there to you could say, sharpen the portfolio of materials that you're providing through a circularity lens? We're looking at the diversity of the materials that you have on offer, and we're looking at collaboration with other partners, maybe knowledge partners, for innovation on materials provision. And here the example we have is from a company called Pigosso, which stands for Paper Bottle Company. And Pigosso actually was made on the basis of a research project between a company which is a materials research startup and Carlsberg, and DTU, our university, was part of a research project a few years ago to see how can we make bio-based and biodegradable containers for beer and other liquids. And on the basis of that, the short story is that this company, Pigosso, has been created and has collaborations with many different types of organizations or companies like L'Oreal and Absolute from Absolute Vodka and so forth, to see how they can really innovate their packaging through the materials. And the story behind that is that there's a lot of research into this and collaboration between traditional material providers and knowledge institutions to see how can we make new products out of the materials that we have and out of materials innovation. So that was the dimension about materials innovation.
And after innovating materials, what we do is to actually go into sourcing and operations. And in this dimension, we are trying to understand how both we acquire our raw materials and how circular they could be, but also looking to our internal processing facilities inside the company to understand how efficient we are in doing that. And here we look into many different areas with many different questions as well. For instance, how ready are we to take upon circular sources, or in establishing collaborations for sourcing of more circular materials, as we just saw with Carlsberg and the Pigosso company. Looking into industrial symbiosis, how do we actually take maybe a waste from other companies as raw material to us, but also deliver our waste as raw material to other companies? How efficient our operations are and how ready we actually are to making that more efficient. How ready we are also to take up some new technologies that will enable a higher circularity. And finally, how ready we are to actually establishing strong requirements to our own suppliers in relation to both sustainability and circularity. And the example that we have here for today, for you today, is from BASF, one of the biggest chemical companies in the world. They've been working with renewable materials as a part of their strategy for circular economy for quite many years. And in this specific example, you see one of their waste products. So it was an unused part of that specific plant. They found a quite high value application for it, for using the cosmetic industry as an active ingredient. And by doing that, in addition to avoiding this waste stream, they actually also developed a new material that are extremely efficient to be produced. And by doing that, they open up a whole new market. But as I mentioned before, no matter how good those materials are, they will eventually reach the end of life. And then we need looping. Could you talk a little bit more about looping to us, Tim?
You bet. Yeah, so a circular economy is nothing without the circle part of it, which is this part about getting all of what we've done so far, the readiness, back at the end of life or end of use of a product or a system or a material. So what we're looking at here is to understand how ready we are as an organization, as a company, to actually support recirculation at a materials level. In other layers, we look at different levels, but here we're looking in particular at the materials level. And we're asking here about how ready you are as a company in terms of the processes and technologies you have to close the loop. So what do you have in place to be able to make sure that the loop is closed, both in terms of, you could say, inspection, but also to look at sourcing and quality control. We're looking at the infrastructure, because there's a lot of infrastructure is needed to get products back or materials back to our organization to be able to recycle them or to recirculate them in some way. And we're looking particularly at how ready you are as an organization to recirculate materials. We're looking at aspects such as the value chain engagement, because of course you need to have very close collaborations with, for sure, logistics partners, but all sorts of different societal players and value chain players to be able to achieve a closed loop. And for that, in particular, we're asking you about take-back systems. Do you have a take-back system in place? Are you looking at take-back systems? Are you collaborating on a take-back system to ensure some of this certainty to get your materials back? Once we get materials back, we'd like to know how they are, what condition they're in, how old they are, when they were made, and so forth. So materials information transparency is also a really important part of understanding the circularity readiness of our company to be able to take materials back. How transparent is the information for us, but maybe also others who may receive these materials for consideration for circulation. And finally, we ask you about testing looped materials, so the materials that are coming back. What is your testing capability or your readiness for testing of materials? So the example that we brought here is a company called Lanxess. It's a chemistry company, and basically what they're doing is they've carried out a polystyrene project. And those of you who know polystyrene as a material, from a production perspective, it can be great, and from a circularity and sustainability perspective, it's very problematic because it's very bulky and it weighs very little. So even though it weighs little, it fills an awful lot in the transport part of taking back. So this company is working with partners to develop this an innovative recycling concept for complete recycling of flame retardant polystyrene, which is used for insulation panels. So this is a very, very clear example of a company which is really focusing on its readiness for being able to loop products back. After we've understood the looping part of it, there's a hidden dimension which Daniela is going to tell us about.
Yeah, and up until now, we've been looking mostly internally in the company to understand the readiness. But we know that as important as it is to look internally is to look into how ready actually our markets, but also the legal frameworks are to enable circularity in our company, in our business, but also in our sector. And this is exactly what we want to explore in this dimension, where we look into readiness in terms of national and international legislation. We look into sectorial legislation and market limitations, but also market engagement. Are we actually ready to hear whether our customers are asking for circular solutions? And if they are, how ready are we to actually react to those and work together and collaborate towards doing that? We are also looking to having a proactive way for exploring the market readiness for new materials and new business models so that we can really have a holistic understanding of our market. And the example that we have here for you in relation to this dimension is from Nespresso. We know it's an extremely successful business in the coffee industry. But one of the key challenges that they faced was in relation to the recycling of their capsules. The problem was that it was actually illegal for the company in the past to handle those end-of-life capsules. And in order to be able to enhance the recyclability and so forth, they actually had to have a very strong collaboration with the government to actually change the law and change policy so that customers could return these used capsules for recycling. And of course, that was the right thing to do. It was illegal. And in their case, it was a really important activity to ensure a higher circularity as well. So with that, we finished the 6 dimensions for measuring readiness in the materials providers. We have a number of different questions in the platform, and this is done through a self-assessment where we encourage many different people from the same company to join so that we can have a very robust result in relation to your readiness profile, and we can trust only to define what are the next steps to make the transition and where to focus. And now it's time to have a look in the platform, right, Tim?
Yeah, so let's take a brief look at the platform. So here we go now into the platform where we were before. So if you maybe take one step back, Daniela, to find out how to get in there again, we go to the My Loop part of it at the top. And once we get into there, it will ask us which value chain layer we'd like to go to. And here, of course, we'd like to go to the materials providers layer. And here we've filled in the platform, so it says see your results. And here you can see this is a dummy company called DTU, and it has lots of business units, which are like the African content division, another test, and so forth. And in the left-hand one at the company level, we can see the readiness results here. So let's just click on the readiness results first of all. Here's showing exactly the picture that we talked you through. And if we were to click on the different areas here, it will show us the results of the readiness assessments. So here we're seeing all the different dimensions and the aspects we were talking about in terms of from a strategy and business model perspective, from a materials innovation perspective, and so forth. If we go back out to the front of this, we can basically see, yes, exactly there, the readiness score of this case. It's showing how many assessments we have there, the agreement level, which is the how low the standard deviation between the different assessments is, the expertise coverage, and then the robustness. And again, those of you who know the Match platform from before, it's the same logic. So the robustness is how much can we trust the results here? And they are a product of the amount of assessments, the agreement level, and the expertise coverage. The more assessments you get from your company, the more you can trust the results from there. Very, very briefly, on the left-hand side, we have a bunch of new features, and we're not going to go through them in detail. You can play with them yourselves later. But first of all, you can benchmark. When we go into the benchmark, you can look from benchmarking against yourself to a number of other companies. You can take all the companies. And on this platform, we've just released it, so we only have 43 other companies on the platform just now. But you can basically go in, and in your own time, you can go and filter in terms of different aspects, different characteristics, the sector, the country, the company type, and the company size, and so forth. Once you've done benchmarking and understanding your current state, you can do a prioritization. And the prioritization is on the left-hand side to see which of the dimensions do we want to actually choose to go further with, and how would we like to take the readiness further. And after that, once we've made a prioritization, we can do a transition path. And this is what Nikki and Jar are going to tell us about in a few seconds. Here you can say we haven't done our prioritization yet, so we can't do the transition path. The next button down is the accelerator part, which brings us to Nikki and Jar. And they're going to tell us more about that later, but you can choose here which country you're based in, and on the basis of that, which consultancies we have certified to use the platform and to guide you through. Underneath there, you can invite a colleague. So you can go in and invite all the colleagues that you have in your company, and basically it's recognizing you on the mail address. So everything that comes after the @ symbol on your email address is identifying your company. And for the same reason, we don't allow Gmail, Hotmail, and any generic email addresses. It needs to be a company address. But here you can go and invite all your colleagues. So that, I think, was the shortest presentation of the platform we've ever given. Let's go back to the presentation and very, very briefly show what next in terms of how you can do with the platform and what we're planning before we give over to Nikki and to Jar.
And this is what I promised to you in relation to the new releases. So today, materials providers, before the end of the year, a new layer, very value recovery companies. Next year, 2 more layers, component manufacturers and retailers. And then again, by 2024, we have the final 2, logistic providers and repair and maintenance services. And with that, we complete the entire value chain with all the different possibilities for collaboration, so that companies can not only focus on their individual readiness, but also on the readiness across the entire value chain. To summarize, what companies get by being part of the readiness assessment for each and every layer will be a readiness profile, where they can understand strengths and gaps in relation to their own transition. They can also do a benchmarking to understand how ready they are in relation to other similar companies. But they can also define how to move forward. And for us, it is the most important thing, because doing a readiness assessment is really looking at the mirror and seeing you from a different point of view. But the change only happens when we actually have a decision to transition, and when we have prioritized efforts towards what are our biggest goals and ambitions. So if you're asking yourself what to do from here now, we actually have 3 recommendations. The first one is spread out the word and engage your colleagues and people that you think would get the benefit in engaging with the ready2LOOP platform. either for material providers or any of the other layers that we have here. Help them then to prioritize the efforts. We know that this is a really important part of the transition. We need to understand where to invest resources on the basis of the strategic goals. And finally, if you are curious to hear more about the tools, more than 100 tools that we have in the platform, check it out. We are sure that at least a few of them will be extremely relevant for you in this stage of the journey that you are just now.
You can do all this on your own. If you'd like help to do this, you can actually take an accelerator project as well. And as we briefly showed before on the platform, there are 2 consultancies that we have allied ourselves with for both the development and also the implementation of the platform for the accelerator part. And this is ready2LOOP and Rambo. I'm going to hand over to Nikki and to Jar to introduce us to the accelerator process, which you can run through if you're interested there and see what the different steps are. So over to you, Jar, Nikki.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. And just to say also, it's super exciting to be along here, and just a short information about those of you who are not familiar with Rumble. We are a company doing engineering, architecture, and consulting internationally, and we are roughly 17,000 global. And I'm part of the unit here in Denmark, also internationally, with about 200 people working with strategic sustainability consulting. Of course, circularity a big part in that. And we work very closely together, Jar's team and my team here. So also to flag this, we developed a process together for you if you're interested in going further from what Daniela and Tim just introduced, let's say from knowing assessment over to, okay, what should happen now? What do we actually do? How can we use this? And I think, Jar, if you can give the word to you, and then you will introduce the process. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Nikki, and also thank you, Tim and Daniela. Personally, I can't wait to work with this new layer. I've been following the platform and the development since Match, so this new layer is very exciting indeed. So I'm from ready2LOOP. I'm a project manager and consultant and ready2LOOP. And again, for the ones who don't know ready2LOOP, we are engineering consultants working mainly with sustainability, but quite broadly. We have climate accounting. We work with EDPs and LCAs. Also, we have what's called sustainable communication, which is a super interesting and important topic. But we also, of course, work with circular economy and help companies transition to a more circular economy as well. And we do that through the ready2LOOP project and the platform. And if we can go to the first step, we can kind of specify what are the different steps really quickly. The processes are similar, whether it's ready2LOOP or Rambo. The first step will be to engage the key stakeholders. So we'll help you identify which stakeholders and roles and functions within the company that will be relevant to participate and engage in the circular transition. And the next step will to take these key stakeholders to go through the circular readiness assessment. So basically go through the specific layer that will suit your company and answer the different questions and the surveys on the platform. So here it can both be divided into a physical workshop, which is preferable because it creates much better results, but also for the other stakeholders that can't participate, you can also do the survey from home, so to say, and then compare those results and aggregate those data together. The next step is to take those results and reflect on the key strengths and gaps within your organization, and that also gives an opportunity to prioritize the different dimensions, which I think Nikki would specify a little bit more on.
Yes, exactly. So basically, when this reflection has taken place, where are my strengths and gaps? It's basically then time to find out what are actually my opportunities here. What can you do? What number one? What opportunities are there? And then what is the size of them? What are big? Which ones are big or smaller? And not the least, also which of those do you in your company have direct influence without asking, so to say, anyone else? Or as Daniela also explained earlier, for instance, where do you have to wait for some certain regulation to come up and so forth. So you have different opportunities, and it's basically in this step to identify them, and in the next step to look into what do we do then with those opportunities where we have identified, okay, this is where we see a big opportunity. And we would like to go into this direction. What is the concrete action plan? What is a roadmap over time? So basically putting those different opportunities in sequence to each other in order to simply say, okay, end of this year, we do this and that. We start with step and go then further over the next couple of years with a certain roadmap. This will be individual for you, and it will be the start for your transition process on this journey towards circularity. And with that, I'll go give back to Tim again. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, many thanks, Nikki and Jar, for presenting the process to us here. Just by way of closing, so if any of you have any questions, we have a couple of questions in the chat, which we'll answer in a second or two. But just by way of closing, we'll just put this backdrop to give you a bit more inspiration as to the types of companies you might expect to be on the platform. We allow you to do benchmarking, but the benchmarking is anonymous from on a specific level. But these are some of the companies who have been to workshops with us or are case companies on the platform, and you can see there's quite many there that you can join us with. So you're more than welcome to join us. I can see there's a couple of questions in the Q&A, and Daniela, would you take the first one? It's about, what about urban mining companies? Can they use the platform?
Yes, they can, and they can especially use the new layer that we'll be launching later this year. That is the value recovery companies, and there will be a whole new range of dimensions and a whole new range of questions that we really recommend to have a look into. Let me maybe just also take the opportunity to ask you the other question, Tim, and it is, how do I collaborate with other companies in the platform? Is that even possible?
It is, and it will be more and more possible as it goes on. So we're running a number of workshops and activities, and in fact, we have a workshop in Helsinki in just 2 weeks' time, which is looking exactly at materials providers as well. So you're more than welcome to come to that. We can send some details out to you after this webinar. As you can see, if you happen to be in Helsinki, then we can actually try the tools and the methods out and get our hands dirty with the actual platform. But otherwise, as we build all the different value chain layers, we will make those layers, of course, available to the relevant value chain partners. And then later on, once we have the 7 layers in place, we then develop a mechanism in which companies can opt in to say, we were looking for a company, we're a product manufacturer, we'd like to collaborate with a materials provider and make us a form of a matchmaking activity, actually, and also to facilitate that, so that once the matchmaking is done, the companies can collaborate together and decide what level of readiness they would like to share, readiness information they'd like to share with each other. So that's coming along as well after the 7 layers. Daniela, we have time for one final question. Can we use the platform if we provide a service like car sharing, bike renting, and so forth?
Yes, you can. And we already have lots of relevant questions in relation to that in the manufacturing layer. So I would recommend you to log in, to select the manufacturing companies, and there you are going to see all different areas in relation to product and service innovation that are relevant for car sharing, bike sharing, and so forth.
So those are the questions we had in the chat. For the others of you thinking about it and absorbing this, there'll be a recording available for you that you can look at on the website very soon. Otherwise, many thanks for joining us, and we really hope that you enjoy using the platform, but not just enjoy it, that you find it useful in your transition to circular economy, and keep tuned as well for the other platform layers as they are announced and released. Many thanks for today.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks.